Good morning. Welcome to NewsWire. It is the NCAA Tournament. Welcome to the madness. The field of 64 is set. Tip-off is 1 hour and 15 minutes from now. And we have you covered all day long here on SportsGrid starting at noon. It is Bracket Central taking you all the way up until 10 p.m. Eastern. Should be a lot of fun. All the games, all the madness, the live odds, the props, everything that you could ask for. This is your spot this morning. Of course, we're going to have tons of preview here on the show, so stay tuned throughout the program as we go over all of the early games, all of the late games. In addition, we got some great guests for you. Kaufman's Corner is back here on another edition of SportsGrid. We will preview those games as well. Guest contributor, of course, from Sporting News, Legal Sports Report. We'll talk about the bracket. Sam McQuillan will be with us. It's an action-packed edition. At 12 p.m. Eastern, it all begins right for you here on SportsGrid. And we'll get back to college basketball in just a minute. But first, a really big story in the world of sports, and by the way, pertains to the top player in Major League Baseball and a gambling allegation. And again, still a lot to unpack and very early on into the story. We're not even 24 hours in. But Ippei Mizuhara, who is the interpreter for Shohei Ohtani, has been fired by the Los Angeles Dodgers. He had been with Ohtani, of course, since his days in Los Angeles with the Angels. And the allegations are that Ohtani himself wired $4.5 million to pay off gambling debts that were incurred by the interpreter named Mizuhara. Now, there are several published reports, both on ESPN and The Athletic, reporting that Mizuhara told the team right after the first game of the season that was played in Seoul, Korea, that essentially had a very big gambling problem and an addiction, and then even met, according to ESPN, and did a 90-minute interview with them detailing all of these things that he's done over the last few years. Then Ohtani's PR department, again, according to ESPN, got involved, walked back all those allegations, and essentially are saying there's no further comment. Now, the Dodgers did play the Padres earlier this morning in Seoul, Korea. Ohtani, after the game, had no comment and was whisked out by public relations. So needless to say, Major League Baseball, as of yet, has not charged Ohtani with anything. There are no legal ramifications as of right now with anything. But the most important part of the story is that the $4.5 million, at least allegedly, according to ESPN, was wired to an offshore sports book, which in the state of California is illegal, because sports betting right now in California is not legal like some of the other states here in the country. So a lot more to get to here with this show, with this program. And of course, if we have anything for you here on the show, we'll tell you more about it. But naturally, when it surrounds Ohtani and some potential allegations of sports betting illegally, I may say illegally in California, that's really where the cusp of this comes from. Okay, now, as far as on the field today, let's get to it. The Padres, in a wild one, ended up beating the Dodgers. The final score was 15-11 in Korea. Yamamoto made his first start. It did not go well. Needless to say, he'll get another start. He'll probably be fine. Blake Snell hopes to pitch in the Giants' opening series against the Padres. He, of course, just signed recently. Aaron Judge is back in the lineup after a 9-day absence with that oblique issue. He hasn't played since March 10th. Cincinnati Reds, Matt McQuillan may need surgery on his left shoulder. Great infielder for them. They also have TJ Friedl, who's out as well. But they did trade for Espinal, the infielder from the Blue Jays, at least to soften the blow yesterday. Also, one quick note, a signing in Major League Baseball. The Athletic reports Michael Lorenzen, one of the last two big pitchers that has not yet signed, has signed with the Texas Rangers 1 year, $4.5 million. That means Jordan Montgomery is the last pitcher, big pitcher, to sign in terms of free agency. All right, as I mentioned, we're 1 hour away. The first game, it's Tom Izzo's world. It's the NCAA Tournament. Here's the point spread. Michigan State taking on Mississippi State. First game of the day, Michigan State minus 1.5 point favorites, total of 130.5. So that's just one of the games that we'll be previewing for you on the show. But again, officially the 8 versus the 9, first game of the day. Grambling is headed to the field of 64. They defeated Montana State last night, 88-81. Colorado beat Boise State 60-53. So the Buffaloes are also in the NCAA Tournament field of 64 as well. Tyler Kolek of Marquette, he's participating in full court 5-on-5s. He's trying to get ready for their upcoming game. And by the way, Marquette, according to ESPN and their bracketology, has been the team picked to be eliminated the most in the NCAA Tournament, which is bad news for me because in my tournament, I got Marquette going pretty far. I think I got Marquette going maybe to the championship. So Maybe a bad move by me. We'll see. All right, let's get to the NBA. The Minnesota Timberwolves have arrested, and there's an employee of theirs that was charged with a felony and a third-degree burglary for allegedly stealing thousands of internal files, including strategic NBA information. This comes off the heels of a person in the National Football League also having some improprieties. His name is Somak Sarkar, who previously serves as a coaching analyst for the Timberwolves. Again, fired, arrested, and charged with felony third-degree burglary. How about this? President Biden met with Doc Rivers and Wes Edens in Milwaukee in a downtown hotel, highlighting some of the administration's Reconnecting Communities initiatives. So good news there that the president and, of course, the NBA getting together to help things out. Celtics clinched the Atlantic Division title with a win over the Bucks, 122-119. Boy, Jaylen Brown's getting some MVP votes. He has been playing fantastic. And speaking of fantastic, how about this NBA record? Domantas Sabonis had his 51st straight triple-double, 51 in a row. The record is held by Moses Malone. He's now tied for it. If he gets one more, he breaks the record. Didn't even know it was happening. How about that? All right, are you ready for the Olympics? And are you ready for a red zone version of the Olympic Games this summer? Well, if you're not, you better, because guess who? Scott Hansen, Andrew Siciliano, they're going to be hosting something called the Gold Zone. It was announced yesterday for the Paris Olympics. This, of course, can be seen on NBC and Peacock. It will be the first time that Andrew Siciliano has been involved in the Gold Zone, and the same for Scott Hansen. So this will be a kind of whip around of the Olympics in the Summer Games. The NFL Competition Committee has proposed to change the kickoff rule, prohibiting the hip drop tackling technique. Also, an arrest warrant was issued for Lions cornerback Cameron Sutton for alleged domestic battery. And in the National Football League, free agency, by the way, is still going on. And wouldn't you know, it looks like the Miami Dolphins are in search of a new wide receiver. They are hosting Odell Beckham Jr. at their facility in Miami Gardens. Beckham Jr., of course, played last year with the Baltimore Ravens, and Michael Gallup could be a member of the Baltimore Ravens as he is visiting as well. So a little bit of a carousel going on here on the show. All right, Michael DeCourcy is up next, folks. So you want to stay tuned for him because he's going to preview all the games in the NBA. Now, if you're following the brackets and the odds, and you want to know the very latest in terms of what the point spreads are, what the brackets look like, just get out your phone and scan this QR code right here, because this is the SportsGrid app. We've got it all for you right there on iOS and Android. It'll tell you all about our programming, not to mention our Bracket Central, which, as I mentioned, is getting ready to start. Coach Young is in the house, and so is Ben Stevens. They begin at 12 o'clock Eastern. They'll take you from 12 to 3. Scott Farrell and Mike Carver in the house from 3 p.m. Eastern, and then Kevin and Donnie are here at 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern, and also Gabe is here as well. So if you're familiar with the programming, we've got the best of the best here for you, catching all of the upsets, telling you everything that's going on as the NCAA tournament is less than 67 minutes away as we get ready to begin. So we're going to preview the games coming up next. Michael McQuillan will be with us. Don't go away.
SportsGrid's going to have you covered for this NCAA tournament.
That's the movie that we know. When it's win or go home, they love to go home.
Tennessee's now in my phony club. They should all get together and drink green tea.
Furman's going to have a chance.
That is a team I'm betting on right now.
We are feeling this. You are feeling this at home. The excitement and the atmosphere.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like This
is the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to
Penn
find
State's
a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But
Right.
if we make them a third,
They get in.
This
is the Penn
always
State
going to be
rule.
better than the West half.
Yep.
That 1 year that Lightning in a Bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
The NC State game on Saturday against North Carolina that stood out most to me, that they not only went on a 5-day heater like they did in '83 when Valvano took them another 6 games and they won the national championship.
The committee didn't sit there at the beginning of the week and think that Oregon, New Mexico, NC State, Duquesne, they didn't sit there planning for all those teams to go and win.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid. SportsGrid. Your 24/7 sports wagering network. Pro League Soccer powered by Marca.
I would be willing to bet the under 2.5 goals.
Fantasy sports today.
Especially in head-to-head formats in fantasy, I think I'm going to go with Juan Soto.
Game time decisions.
People don't like it. I don't really care. I cannot believe anybody is betting the Clippers at this number.
Betting above the
All
rim.
I've heard you say on the network is you're either winning or you're rebuilding.
In-game live all access.
Nobody has been more profitable as a dog than Shaka Smart team.
Winning back-to-back road games. I don't care if they're playing Topeka High. I wouldn't give them any chance whatsoever.
In-game live. Prime time.
Back-to-back just utterly stinker quarters.
In-game live. Overtime.
Honestly, as you sit here and listen, watch right now, you may want to consider placing that bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire. The madness about to begin in the field of 64. Tip-off an hour away. Michael DeCourcy is getting ready to sit back, relax, and watch a bunch of the games. So we figured it's a good day to bring him in and preview some of the Thursday action. Michael, thanks again for coming on NewsWire. Really appreciate it.
Oh, happy to do it, but I'm not sure how much relaxing is involved. It'll be great. It's always a blast, but relaxation is for April.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, I mean, I don't get stressed about my brackets anymore. It's like, if I win, I win. If I lose, I lose. And I mean, $25 investment for me. So that's really where I'm at today. Okay, so let's start off with Kansas, one of the big wild cards, I would say, in the NCAA tournament, a team that some feel can go very deep. There are others that feel they could get knocked out right away. I mean, that's probably the nature of every team, honestly. But this team in particular going to be playing without one of their top players. Kevin McCullough Jr. was so good during the regular season. They've learned to play without him, though, Mike, a little bit here, I would say. But the odds have certainly changed, and they've picked up a little bit against Kansas, so it does show you what he was worth. They do take on Samford today. The line was 9.5 to open. It's crawled down to about 6.5 with a total of 154. Let's start with this game. Are we in store for a big upset today with Samford and Kansas?
It's hard to say. Some of this is dependent on how Hunter Dickinson is, because he injured his shoulder in the final regular season game against Houston and then missed the entire Big 12 tournament, which for the Jayhawks only lasted 40 minutes, if that. And so I think with him, they still find a way to win a game. If he's, I can throw it into Hunter Dickinson and expect a bucket 90% of the time, Hunter Dickinson, then they win the game. If he's limited in capacity or effectiveness, then they become absolutely imperiled. Samford is a very good basketball team, and they certainly can play with an impaired Kentucky. Kentucky has to have multiple players step forward at this point. Johnny Furphy has not been a good player with in the absence of McCullough. He has been a really effective player once he got himself together and got adjusted to American college basketball. Johnny's from Australia, and once he got adjusted to American college basketball, he was a really effective player in January and February. But when Kevin went down, Johnny's effectiveness went off the table. So that's a real concern for KU. I don't see them going far, but I do think they can get past this one.
All right, so the money line minus 310 there for the Jayhawks coming up at 9:55 p.m. Eastern. One of the more compelling games going into the matchup is the Long Beach State-Arizona game, where their coach Dan Monson, his future was determined by the school, and then he was determined to get his team into the NCAA tournament, and he did. They take on Arizona today. Long Beach State was not a great team. It's probably the reason why he's not going to coach next year. Arizona's 19.5-point favorites. The total is 163.5. We've seen crazy things happen before. Is this one of them that happens today?
Oh, I don't think it'll be crazy. In fact, I'll be very surprised if Arizona doesn't find a way to cover this. And I think it will be, I think if they don't, it will be a message of where they stand because they played very poorly in the conference tournament. Disappointing result there for them after they had a very mercurial regular season in the Pac-12. So they need to make a statement today. This is not just about coming out and advancing. This is about coming out and saying we're here to actually win this thing. Because they are one of the teams that at least can imagine it. I don't think they're built to win it, but I think they can imagine it, and I certainly think they can get to. I mean, they're in Arizona. They can get to Arizona, but I think they can get up the road to Glendale for those final few games if they commit themselves to excellence. We haven't seen that consistently from them, but I think it happens today. I think they realize that with the region they've been given a real gift relative to what the season that they had would have merited. So there's a great opportunity for them, and if they don't embrace it, it will be a substantial disappointment.
All right, fair enough. Now let's get to the game that is the first on the board. And look, this line did shift a little bit. In fact, I saw Mississippi State initially, I think, open up as a 1-point favorite. Michigan State is now a 1.5 favorite, total of 130.5. If you take Tom Izzo, the head coach, off Michigan State, Mississippi State's probably a bigger favorite, 2 points, 3 points. But when you get to this, when you get to this stage of the season and you get Tom Izzo in the tournament, we have these conversations, and he rarely disappoints. Now, I don't know if they could win 2 games, Mike, but they're favored to win today.
Yeah, that's the big deal there. I was going to say it's totally the Izzo factor to see it shift like that because Mississippi State coming off a phenomenal performance last weekend against Tennessee. Michigan State, very combative and competitive in the quarterfinals against Purdue, so that was a nice sign. But they have not been a consistently effective team all year. They have been very up and down, mostly down. It's been a disappointing performance by the Spartans, but it is Tom Izzo in March. And how often does that not work? It didn't work in 2021 when they played UCLA in the first 4. There are a couple other along the way, but we're talking about a history that goes back now a good 30 years, and very rarely has Michigan State disappointed early in the tournament. So I understand totally why people would pile on to that side of it, but I have to see it to believe it. I would not put money on Michigan State at any price at this point. I understand maybe being a little suspicious of Mississippi State because they only recently started to play effectively at the level we need to advance in the NCAA tournament. But I would not put money on Michigan State at this stage. Those who believe in Tom, and I believe in him thoroughly, just not enough to part with my money.
Yeah, understood. Fair enough, Mike. All right, well, usually teams that don't make a ton of appearances in the NCAA tournament, when they make their first one or their second one, they tend to have success. And I wonder if you feel that will be the case with Duquesne, who has got into the dance. They are 9.5-point underdogs. Let's not get it twisted here. BYU is a really good team, but Duquesne is one of those teams kind of playing with house money here a little bit, feeling themselves. You know how these things usually work out. Could they pull off an upset today against BYU? Do they have a chance to cover, or are the Cougs just too much today?
I don't expect an upset, but the way they played in the A-10 tournament suggests that they'll not go down easily. I think that they will be in the picture, and then it's a question of how the game ends, really. Does Duquesne foul a lot to try to get back into it? I don't think they'll be leading. I'll be shocked if they are. Does BYU stretch their point total over the number just because of those late fouls? But those who are inclined to take Duquesne at that number. I think there's a reason for that. The fact they battled through those 3 games in the Atlantic 10 tournament, the last 3 games, really impressive. The way they handled it, the way they handled the pressure of being obviously not a team that would get here without that conference tournament title. I thought they handled it beautifully. And right now, the only question for me is, do they then play at a less high level because now they're playing with the house money kind of thing? Now they're here. They've accomplished what they want. Do they relent? Do they relax? That'd be my only worry with Duquesne. That and the 3-point shooting of BYU, which can be phenomenal.
All right, let's close it out with one of the hottest teams in the country, Illinois. They're up to 11.5-point favorites over Morehead State. Morehead State, no stranger to the tournament. Feels like, Mike, once every 3-4 years they pop in. Here they are again. Total of 147.5. Boy, I don't want to get in the way of Illinois right now. I don't know that they can win it all, but you talk about a scorching hot team right now. This is one of them.
I'm honestly surprised the number's that low. I like Morehead's team. And I certainly admire what they've accomplished, but Illinois can put up the big numbers. I'm surprised that their number is that low in that game. Would not be at all surprised to see them cover that. They have a dynamic, powerful offense.
All right. Well, Mike, enjoy all the games, and we'll catch up again next week. Thanks for coming on. We'll be right back with Sam McQuillan.
SportsGrid's going to have you covered for this NCAA tournament.
That's the movie that we know. When it's win or go home, they love to go home.
Tennessee's now in my phony club. They should all get together and drink green tea.
Truman's going to have a chance. That is a team I'm betting on right now.
We are feeling this. You are feeling this at home. The excitement and the atmosphere.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like
This
is the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to
Penn
find
State's
a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But
Right.
if we make them a third,
They get in.
This
is the Penn
always
State
going to be
rule.
better than the West half.
Yep.
That 1 year that lightning in a bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the book.
The NC State game on Saturday against North Carolina that stood out most to me, that they not only went on a 5-day heater like they did in '83 when Valvano took them another 6 games and they won the national championship.
The committee didn't sit there at the beginning of the week and think that Oregon, New Mexico, NC State, Duquesne, they didn't sit there planning for all those teams to go and win.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid. SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. Pro League Soccer, powered by Marca.
I would be willing to bet the under 2.5 goals.
Fantasy sports today.
Especially in head-to-head formats in fantasy, I think I'm going to go with Juan Soto.
Game time decisions.
People don't like it. I don't really care. I cannot believe anybody is betting the Clippers at this number.
Betting above the
All
rim.
I've heard you say on the network is you're either winning or you're rebuilding.
In-game live all access.
Nobody has been more profitable as a dog than Shaka Smart team.
Winning back-to-back road games. I don't care if they're playing Topeka High. I wouldn't give them any chance whatsoever.
In-game live. Prime time.
Back-to-back, just utterly stinker quarters.
In-game live. Overtime.
Honestly, as you sit here and listen, watch right now, you may want to consider placing that bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
We'll get back to college hoops and previews coming up in just a few minutes. Let's bring in Sam McQuillan from Legal Sports Report to recap the top story of the day in sports. Who would have thought it'd be bigger than the NCAA tournament? But indeed it is, as Shohei Ohtani's interpreter seems to be in some hot water. The question is Ohtani as well? Sam, thanks for coming on NewsWire. How are you?
Yeah, Craig, doing well. Excited to talk about all these interesting sports relevant topics we have today.
Yeah, and we'll get to the tournament and sort of the guide as to where you live, what you can specifically bet on as far as college hoops. We'll get to that in just a minute, but we got to start off with the story that was broken by ESPN last night, which is allegedly $4.5 million was wired by Shohei Ohtani to pay off gambling debts for his interpreter. The interpreter has been fired. There's been no comment whatsoever from Ohtani, and even after the game today, he did not speak. A walk-back interview that was basically not used. I don't think it will be played, where ESPN spoke to the interpreter for a long time, got his side of the story. Apparently that was not good enough for Ohtani and his PR team. I guess the bottom line here, Sam, is the culpability, to me, lies with what baseball decides to do about a $4.5 million wire going to a sports book that is illegal. I think that's really the key in this whole story, isn't it?
Yeah, Craig, even bigger, as you point out, than this scandal happening with probably the biggest player in the sport is the way it was handled, the way it was reported. We had late yesterday, the LA Times came out with their version of the story, and then shortly after, ESPN had their version, which included, like you said, an interview that had been done prior to this news really coming out with Shohei Ohtani's team. Then probably what happened is his team saw what was said, thought maybe it admitted some culpability on his part and involvement, and said, refuted all the claims and said basically none of that ever happened. And like you said, he's been quiet. So I'd imagine the league is investigating a lot more and will continue to do so as the season, goes on. I mean, Ohtani, I believe he's still recovering and isn't playing as often as he used to. So maybe that'll be part of it. I don't know if he'll get suspended, but we're still learning more here. Essentially what happened, what was reported, was that Ohtani's lawyers have accused his former interpreter, Ippei Mizuhara, of wiring $4.5 million from Ohtani's bank account to cover illegal gambling debts with an illegal bookie that unsurprisingly is accused of being in California, where Ohtani spent the entirety of his Major League Baseball career, first with the Angels, now with the Dodgers. And California is notably one of the largest states where sports betting is illegal. So no matter what betting you're doing there, unless it's gambling at one of the small Native American casinos, it would be illegal. The alleged bookie involved, Matthew Bauer, how this came out, he was under current federal investigation. And that's kind of where the first reports of this coming out started to come from. A couple of $500,000 payments were flagged from Ohtani to this guy Bauer that were marked as loans. The feds marked that. And Ohtani's lawyers came out and defended the action, saying, Mizuhara had no idea that this was illegal, first of all, and he's a longtime friend of Ohtani's. So they said that Ohtani decided in good faith to basically pay off his friend's gambling debts and maintain that Ohtani had no involvement in the betting, even though this was money coming from his account with his name to pay off these debts. You can certainly see why that would raise some red flags. But then yesterday, they went back on the comments, his spokespeople did, and said that Ohtani actually had no knowledge of this gambling going on at all, and he didn't transfer the money, and essentially accusing the interpreter of stealing the money and going on his own to do it. They've been pretty quiet after that. The guy who was involved, the alleged bookie, said that none of the bets were on baseball. It was all on international soccer matches and a few other sports stemming back from 2021. But more sources that came out in the ESPN article and the LA Times article said that this guy basically allowed people to think that it was Ohtani who was betting with him to kind of promote business and attract other people, because obviously that's a big name if you're taking a lot of money from a huge athlete. We've seen countless of other athletes involved in this kind of thing. He was fired Wednesday. Mizuhara was a longtime friend of Ohtani. And I bet we'll get more to come here, certainly. And you see Ohtani's team kind of buttoning up and preparing sort of for the worst. The MLB obviously doesn't take allegations like this lightly. And funny enough, it's not the first time Ohtani's been involved in some sort of sports betting snafu or scandal like that. When he was going to sign this offseason I think there was a report, you'll recall, that he was on a plane to Toronto, and that suddenly shifted the World Series odds. They were favorites, and then right after it came out that, oh, actually, he's not on his way to Toronto. He's going to sign with the Dodgers. All of a sudden, they went to 18-1. So not the first time he's been involved in something like this, but certainly a very, very serious situation versus last time. So we'll see what comes here.
Yeah, I would also tell you that time that you just mentioned had nothing to do with Ohtani. That was not his fault at all. Had nothing to do with him.
Just bad reporting.
Poor reporting. Yeah, poor reporting at that time. And I think for people who are not completely familiar, somebody would ask the question, and I can answer it myself. But obviously, Sam, the amount of wagers that you have to get to $4.5 million, people may be asking, wait a second here. How is it possible that Ohtani didn't know that hundreds of thousands of dollars were being wagered? And I guess, Sam, the easy answer to this is for people who don't understand how this works is that, if you're betting offshore potentially, or even betting with somebody locally, at least in the past illegally, you just make a phone call, tell them how much you want to bet. You get a certain amount of credit. Again, this guy knows Ohtani is involved and really probably says, you know what, whatever your limit is your limit, because we know that you're going to be able to pay it off in the end. And I think there's some confusion there with people thinking that he was actually sending hundreds of thousands of dollars in wagers, where inevitably, Sam, it sounds like he was sending nothing. And then in the end, as you said, he just sent a couple of payments toward the money that he lost.
Right. Yeah, these weren't deposits going from his bank account into an app repeatedly, constantly over a long period of time. That's honestly one of the reasons people continue to use the offshore market is you get all this credit, and then in turn the bookies. Yeah, if you have someone like Ohtani backing you and associated with you, I think he just signed a pretty big contract, so he probably thought he's good for the money.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so NCAA tournament is starting in 45 minutes. There's people all over the country who are going to bet on it. Some will be surprised when there are things that they can't do this afternoon, like player props, as an example, maybe betting on a team in their own state. And it just really varies state by state, Sam. And I know there's so much to unpack, and there's so many different legal sports betting markets that have taken precautions here. Do you want to highlight any of them in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got the NCAA tournament underway. This is the first year ever that 11 of the 14 host sites are going to be in states where legal betting is allowed. So you just see that's one, betting is growing, and two, the tournament is embracing more of the money from sports betting that's pumped into so many other sports. But less than half of the teams actually playing in the tournament represent legal betting states. So a lot of the fans of those local teams that are playing in the tournament won't be able to bet, at least within their own state. And then even the states that do have sports betting legal have some pretty weird rules. Only actually 6 states in the country have 0 restrictions on college sports betting at all, which is pretty significant when you talk about 38 states having sports betting in general. So you have some states like Arizona, Colorado, Pennsylvania, Florida, New York. They don't allow college player prop betting, as you alluded to earlier. That kind of stems from, not wanting college players to be influenced in any way. With the prevalence of apps everywhere, it'd be pretty easy to just, not score a basket here or there, though some have argued that keeps things offshore and in the dark. But so far, we haven't had any, big scandals like that yet within college basketball, at least yet this year. And then you have other states like Illinois and Iowa, which is pretty important for women's basketball these days, which don't allow player prop betting on their own team. So you can bet on any other, rebound props or points props for other teams, but not your own state teams. And then you get into some really weird states like New Jersey. You might recall 2 years ago when St. Peter's stole all of our hearts, made this miracle run, became the first 15 seed to make the Elite Eight. You actually couldn't bet on St. Peter's in New Jersey. So even though it attracted a lot of local enthusiasm, people couldn't back it. People couldn't put their money on it. And it set up a scenario where if St. Peter's had come out of the East region and beat UNC, people who bet on UNC still would have been paid out as if you won the region, just because of the state's rules. They prohibit betting on the in-state college teams. It basically says whoever advances the furthest is the winner of the region. So, I mean, St. Peter's could do that again this year. So maybe there's some sort of edge to be had on a team you think might fall to them later on. Certainly, we'll see if they make it out of the first round even. But lawmakers have tried to change that rule over the past couple of years, but it's hard to really get a lot of legislative support to make kind of this one small change. And New Jersey's a pretty old state with sports betting, so they haven't had many problems in the past. Kind of keep it this way. Virginia similarly prohibits betting on in-state teams, even if they're in a national tournament. And New York does as well. Though New York will be hosting the first and second round games this year. In the past, they had prohibited betting on any games in the state, even if it wasn't a New York team. But lawmakers actually changed the rule a few years ago to open the way for things like the Atlantic 10 tournament, Big East being played, and now March Madness. You can bet on all those teams as long as they're not New York based. Then you have states like Connecticut, which prohibit betting on their teams unless they're playing in a tournament. So you can bet on UConn and Yale and Connecticut, just not if they're playing regular season games in the state. So a lot of different nuances state to state. We got a good article on Legal Sports Report that breaks it all down.
All right. Well, Sam, listen, enjoy the NCAA tournament. Thanks again for coming on NewsWire. We'll, of course, read all the articles and catch up with you next week here on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Yep. Enjoy March Madness, Greg.
All right. Sam McQuillan with us. We're going to enjoy previewing more games. Kaufman's Corner is up next. Adam Kaufman joins us here on NewsWire. We'll run through as many games as we can with tip-off less than an hour away. Also, don't forget, Bracket Central coming your way, noon Eastern, with Ben Stevens and Coach Jones. Be right back.
SportsGrid's going to have you covered for this NCAA tournament.
That's the movie that we know. When it's win or go home, they love to go home.
Tennessee's now in my phony club. They should all get together and drink green tea.
Furman's going to have a chance. That is a team I'm betting on right now.
We are feeling this. You are feeling this at home. The excitement and the atmosphere.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like
This is
the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to find a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But if we make them a third,
they get in.
Third,
this is the Penn
always
State
going to
rule.
be better than the West half.
Yep.
And that 1 year that lightning in a bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
The NC State game on Saturday against North Carolina that stood out most to me, that they not only went on a 5-day heater like they did in '83 when Valvano took them another 6 games and they won the national championship.
The committee didn't sit there at the beginning of the week and think that Oregon, New Mexico, NC State, Duquesne, they didn't sit there planning for all those teams to go and win.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid. SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. Pro League Soccer, powered by Marca.
I would be willing to bet the under 2.5 goals.
Fantasy sports today.
Especially in head-to-head formats in fantasy, I think I'm going to go with Juan Soto.
Game time decisions.
People don't like it. I don't really care. I cannot believe anybody is betting the Clippers at this number.
Betting above the
All
rim.
I've heard you say on the network is you're either winning or you're rebuilding.
In-game live all access.
Nobody has been more profitable as a dog than Shaka Smart team.
Winning back-to-back road games. I don't care if they're playing Topeka High. I wouldn't give them any chance whatsoever.
In-game live. Prime time.
Back-to-back, just utterly stinker quarters.
In-game live. Overtime.
Honestly, as you sit here and listen, watch right now, you may want to consider placing that bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire as we get ready for Bracket Central in 20 minutes here on SportsGrid. Adam Kaufman's all ready to go here. Kaufman's Corner is upon us on our network as we preview. I mean, I'm looking at my screen. I'm seeing like 8 games. I don't know if we can get to them all. We're going to try our best. Adam, thanks for coming on. But look, it's a lot of fun, right? Like this time of the year, this is what we want. We want to be inundated with games from noon to midnight. And I can't wait for this thing to get started.
Well, I'll tell you what, Craig, I saw just before coming on, somebody wrote on Twitter, happy degenerate Christmas to all those who celebrate. And that's exactly what this is. Like you said, this is 12 hours of literal madness where we're all sitting there hugging our brackets, hoping for the best, dreaming big of that perfection that never happens, and just hoping that we don't get destroyed on day one. All I want to know, especially after listening to that last segment you had on the show, which way is Shohei Ohtani leaning with his picks? Because whichever way he's betting, you got to fade him. You got to go the other way. He's not very good at this.
Right. 4.5 million go the other way. That's we'll build another hotel off the opposite. Yes, right. That sounds right. Before we get to the games, give me your overview as to what this tournament you think is going to look like. There's really no middle ground here. It's either a tournament, Adam, where it's upside down, like last year was maybe the most upside down of all time, but we had a streak previous to that where it was like all the 1 seeds were going to the Final Four. There is no in between with this tournament. I've heard people say, oh, it's going to be somewhere in between. That's not possible. It's one way or the other. Which way is it this year?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a little chalky, or not complete chalk, where we see, 4 1 seeds in the Final Four or something like that. But I'd be just looking at the brackets and the strength of these teams. They'll probably be that 1-5 seed or something that sneaks into the Final Four. But other than that, I would expect 1s, 2s, 3s. Obviously, as I'm sure you've talked about on your show, that East region is a gauntlet, an absolute gauntlet. It's a march of death. I mean, you have 3 teams in that one region that were in the Final Four last year, which is just incredible to think about, obviously. You look at the West, it's not necessarily nearly as impressive. I think North Carolina could get it done, but I would tend to lean toward Arizona coming out of that bracket or that specific region. Looking over at on the south side of things, Houston for a while has been everybody's darling. A lot of people, and I'm one of them, have said Houston, this is, Final Four at the very least, and obviously a team that is capable of winning a championship. And a lot of people, I mean, there's a reason this team is high up on the board, top 3, top 4, top 2 even in terms of the odds. But I wouldn't be at all surprised if Houston does get knocked off. Not early, but, looking at, in the last couple rounds before they get to the Final Four, you have obviously Marquette looming. And then obviously the Midwest is really either going to make or break people's brackets, I think, because this is the region where you are going to see some craziness, some upsets. I'll just, to give you a preview, I'm pulling up my bracket right here. I've got McNeese State beating Gonzaga, and I've got Samford beating Kansas. Those are 2 dogs, 2 double-digit seeds, which sets up a second-round battle between McNeese State and Sanford. And so, it becomes, all right, well, can one of those teams actually take down Purdue, assuming that we have Purdue, go that far? As I'd be shock and awe if the Boilermakers don't, especially in the heels of what happened last year, being a 1 that goes down to a 16. We've only seen that happen twice in the history of March Madness here. But, Tennessee is going to be a team to be reckoned with in that region as well. So, I think it's going to be largely chalky by the time we roll around to the Final Four. We know that UConn is like the closest thing to an NBA team that exists in college hoops. They're the defending champs. They're even better this year. Best team with a chance of repeating since we saw Florida do it back in the mid-2000s. I'm excited. It's going to be an exhilarating couple of days here, especially, and then into the weekend.
Yeah, great breakdown of all of it. Upsets to happen, but maybe some of the top teams go to the end. I'm sort of with you on those top teams. Okay, so the NCAA, it's like you don't really think that the conspiracy is in until you see the first game of the day and you realize they know exactly what they're doing. We're putting Tom Izzo on the first game of the day, right? You got to do that. Michigan State takes on Mississippi State. The line, I think, moved a little bit. I saw Mississippi State was less of a dog and more of a favorite until people woke up and said it's Izzo season. So the Spartans are 1.5 point favorites, total of 130.5. Look, the highest rated games, television and streaming, are always going to be later in the night, in the afternoon, because not everybody is home at this time. But I would say that for 15, 20 minutes, it's going to be a lot of fun to see if Michigan State can continue to do what they've done with Izzo over the last few decades.
Well, I'm sure you've talked about trends a lot on this show going into the tournament. There are plenty of people out there that are just trying to figure out how to fill out their brackets and like to go at things blindly. Some good blind trends are betting first half unders, especially these early day games. I did bet the under. It was 59.5 in this game that we're talking about here, Mississippi State and Michigan State, but also going with the dogs, whether on the money line for, obviously plus money opportunities or just to cover, especially in some of these bigger spread situations. This one is not, but that is, these two trends have been largely profitable over the last couple of years. That being said, as we always like to say here, right, it's smarter to be on SportsGrid. And I might be dumb because I'm fading Izzo. I am on the Mississippi State side of things. I fully recognize some of the Michigan State trends. 13-1 as a 9 seed or lower, Michigan State. Izzo in the tourney in general is 55-24. It is hard to count him out. Only one first round loss in his last 15 trips to the tournament. That being said, again, both strong defensively, both tend to play to the under. And I think Mississippi State, is just a hair stronger defensively to where it's going to make the difference in this one. But it's why the spread is obviously as tight as it is.
All right, 12:40 Eastern will be the next tip between Duquesne, back in the tournament for the first time in almost 40 years, against a really good BYU team. BYU 9.5-point favorites, Adam, 142.5 the total. And again, a game like this, can it be an upset? Sure, but we're clearly asking, can Duquesne keep this game close and cover the spread?
Yeah, and I still can't get there. I mean, BYU has already just off the top, Craig, been given a huge favor by the committee. I talked about how loaded that East region is. BYU is a good team and certainly a 3-point happy team, one that can get hot. This could turn to a blowout in a hurry. That being said, it doesn't belong as a 6 seed. This is the committee's 17th ranked team, but it's a 6 seed because they don't play on Sundays. And so they were, effectively just it matched up in their favor in terms of the committee helping them out. So I don't see how BYU, I don't anticipate a long, deep run, but I don't see how BYU loses this game. Again, very difficult to stop offensively, obviously. First tourney win since 2011, I think, is on tap here. And you have to go with the experience. It's a team that even if they haven't won a lot lately, at least they've been there. Like you said, on the other side, Duquesne, 1977, the last time that, any kids from that school, and certainly not these kids, maybe these kids, parents or whatever the math checks out on, but this is going to be overwhelming. I know it's March Madness. I know anything can happen, but I would be shocked if BYU goes down today.
All right. Well, one of the teams that helped himself the most in terms of stock going into the tournament has to be Illinois. 11.5-point favorites over Morehead State. Adam, Morehead State's staff certainly used to this. It feels like they grind once every 3-4 years. They're back in the tournament. Probably says a lot about that college basketball program that they still continue to make the tournament once after the re-recruiting, getting kids in as freshmen, sophomore, etc. But look, they're up against it. Illini 11.5-point favorites, total 147.5 in this one.
Yeah, Illinois hasn't been in the Sweet 16 since 2005, and there are a lot of people out there talking about how this could be the year. Obviously, to do that, you got to get through Morehead State and a couple more opponents on the way. I don't know that I anticipate an upset here. In fact, I probably don't. That being said, I did take Morehead State with the points. When I got it, it was 13.5. Like you said, it's come down a little bit. I just think this team is strong enough defensively. It's a top 20 team in the country based on the Ken Pom metrics, the adjusted defense, defensively, to be able to just sort of muck this thing up and slow it down, turn it into a slog. And Illinois is among the best offenses in the entire country. Since the start of December, it's been the best. Since the start of January, it's been the best. Since the start of February, it's been the best. I say all of that because the Illini are consistent. But I think the defense is going to be good enough on the other side to at least hang, to at least keep this close and make it tough.
All right. I'm going to skip ahead now to some of the night games because we only got a few minutes left here. I'm going to go to Colorado State and Texas. And to me, Adam, this is where the line tells the story here. I mean, we know that Texas is way more talented than Colorado State. But if you watch Texas basketball this season, I mean, they were really awesome because after a big win, you just fade them because they would lose the next game and you would be scratching your head. And that was the whole season for them. Total of 143.5. I mean, I suppose if Texas wins, aren't they going to win by like 17 or they're going to lose, right? Like that's kind of the way this is going to go.
Well, the trend, you kind of alluded to it, is if Texas goes up by 10 at some point in this game, bet Colorado State, because Texas just has all this trouble, obviously, holding on to these double-digit leads. It's been a laughable occurrence throughout the year. I was on Colorado State, Colorado as well, for that matter, in the first four action, and I think these are the two teams that have the chance to actually win a game, in the field of 64. And 11 out of the last 12 years, by the way, we have seen at least one first four team advance, on to the round of 32. I think Colorado is probably the more likely to do it in that matchup with Florida, but I think Colorado State absolutely has a chance. And I would be comfortable, going with the dog here. I like Colorado State. Texas has been underwhelming. It's played basically 500 ball for 6 weeks. We know the offense is great, but the offense is great on the other side. Both these teams can score 75, 80 points per game. And so I would expect a shootout, a tight game, and I would go with the 10-7 upset.
All right. Well, I'm a Gator, Adam, so I got to take the Gators. So it doesn't matter who they're playing or what's going on here. So
I get it. I'm a Syracuse guy, so I don't even, get to watch right now.
Understood. All right, so one of your big upsets that you're predicting is an outright win for McNeese State over Gonzaga. So let's end there. I tend to agree. I mean, the Zags in name only are 6.5-point favorites here. I know they had that great run at the end of the season until they ran into St. Mary's and then lost that series. I mean, to me, that sort of tells the story here. A great Gonzaga team does not lose that game. I think they're going to have their hands full here. Could be a close game, and who knows? Last second win is certainly possible, but this does seem like the points are the way to go.
Well, it's like written in history, too, because we already just were conditioned to want to bet 12s over 5s this time of year anyway. So, when you have a McNeese State team being a 12 against a Gonzaga 5, it feels written in the stars. But yeah, Gonzaga is not the Gonzaga of old. I mean, this team, I realize, hasn't lost in the first round since it fell to Steph Curry and Davidson back in 2008. It's been a long time, obviously, but Gonzaga has had its worst season that we've seen in quite a while, despite the 25-7 record. Looking at some of the metrics here, this team is one of the worst in the field against the spread. McNeese State, obviously, is a 30-win team. Not a lot of people out there probably know that. Phenomenal three-point shooting team, some impressive wins throughout the year, including against UAB. And so I like McNeese State. I'll just tell you, because I know we're about out of time. My favorite play today is Drake in the final game of the day. So go with Drake. It's a virtual home game so close to Omaha.
All right. Awesome stuff, Adam. Enjoy the tournament. Hopefully we'll catch up next week before the Sweet 16. Thanks for coming on.
Sounds great.
All right, Adam Kaufman with us. We'll take a quick time out, let you know what's coming up the rest of the day here on SportsGrid. Don't go away.
SportsGrid's going to have you covered for this NCAA tournament.
That's the movie that we know. When it's win or go home, they love to go home.
Tennessee's now in my phony club. They should all get together and drink green tea.
Furman's going to have a chance. That is a team I'm betting on right now.
We are feeling this. You are feeling this at home. The excitement and the atmosphere.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like
This is
the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to find a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But if we make them a third,
they get in.
Third,
This is
they're
the Penn
always
State
going to
rule.
be better than the West half.
Yep.
And that 1 year that Lightning in a Bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too, because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
The NC State game on Saturday against North Carolina that stood out most to me, that they not only went on a 5-day heater like they did in '83 when Valvano took them another 6 games and they won the national championship.
The committee didn't sit there at the beginning of the week and think that Oregon, New Mexico, NC State, Duquesne, they didn't sit there planning for all those teams to go and win.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid. SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. Pro League Soccer, powered by Marca.
I would be willing to bet the under 2.5 goals.
Fantasy sports today.
Especially head formats and fantasy, I think I'm going to go with Juan Soto.
Game time decisions.
People don't like it. I don't really care. I cannot believe anybody is betting the Clippers at this number.
Betting above the
All
rim.
I've heard you say on the network is you're either winning or you're rebuilding.
In-game live all access.
Nobody has been more profitable as a dog than Shaka Smart team.
Winning back-to-back road games. I don't care if they're playing Topeka High. I wouldn't give them any chance whatsoever.
In-game live, prime time.
Back-to-back, just utterly stinker quarters.
In-game live, overtime.
Honestly, as you sit here and listen, watch right now, you may want to consider placing that bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Okay, welcome back to NewsWire. The NCAA Tournament is here. It is 15 minutes away, but in less than that, 3 minutes away, our programming begins here on SportsGrid. It is Bracket Central. Leading off our coverage is Ben Stevens and Coach James Young. They start at noon. They go till 3 o'clock on the East. Pharrell and Carver, I see they're already ready to go. It's somewhere. I think it looks like they're... Are they on site somewhere? I don't know. It looks like they are. Anyway, 3 o'clock Eastern. They will. Oh, they will be in the studio. Okay. 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. And then Donnie and Kevin after that, 6 p.m. to 10. Gabe on after that. Every game, every spread, live betting. This is, I want to say it's our Super Bowl. It's not our Super Bowl because the Super Bowl is our Super Bowl. I mean, we traveled to the Super Bowl and we're broadcasting live. But this is the next best thing. So I really hope you enjoy all the coverage. I'll be watching with my second screen along with watching the NCAA Tournament today. So very much hope you could be part of it. Thanks to Adam Kaufman, of course, Mike DeCourcy, and Sam McQuillan. Those were our guests. Also, thanks early in the week to our associate producer, Frank, and our producer, Michael Cohen. I'm Craig Mish. Now, tomorrow here on the show, I am going to enjoy some of the basketball and potentially some baseball as well. I don't know. The weather here in Florida is looking bad for tomorrow. But regardless of that, breather day for me. So Mike Blewett will have your pregame coverage on NewsWire tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Eastern. I'll be back with you Saturday morning for our final preview of the baseball season from a fantasy perspective. We'll preview the season 9 a.m. Eastern, me and Davis Maddock. And then I'll see you back here on Monday as we look at the Sweet 16 matchup. So we're off and running. Bracket Central next here on SportsGrid. Stay tuned. They got you covered. Previews of every single game, including the first one. Michigan State, Mississippi State. They're tipping off in 16 minutes from now. Fill out your brackets if you haven't. You're running out of time. You got like 10 minutes to go. Get it in. Someone's going to cancel your bracket. Greg Sussman threatened our whole company. If you don't get it in, you're done. Mine's in. Good luck, everyone.